You are listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report podcast number 249.3, the IU Report with Grant Shouse.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengels.
Grant Shouse, my man, the Hoosiers have a roster coming together, and it looks like, I don't know how good the roster is going to be yet, Grant, but it looks like one that Hoosier fans are going to like.
You know, it's funny that we say this because it seemed like that last year, and it was a team that I think was not very well liked. But this is different. This is under a new coach, a new system. I think probably a better ran system. And Indiana, this was a big week for them in recruiting, getting 2 or 3 new commits, waiting on hopefully another one here soon. One of the top players remaining in the portal.
Who's
The
that?
portal closed this past week, and Indiana, it looked like there for a while, Indiana didn't have a coach. Indiana was still trying to figure out a coach. And then for a while there, Indiana was still trying to figure out a team. Just 5 guys to throw out there on the floor. And it's now started to, I think, officially come together. And I think you're officially going to have your ball club for next season.
What's the latest news?
Nick Dorn is a new commit from Elon. He averaged 15 points a game, shot 35% from 3. This is a 6'7" shooting guard. So this is kind of a Luke Goody, I'd say, kind of player, maybe a little more versatile than Goody. And just from what I read, one of the questions asked to him, I think it was on Inside the Hall, one of the questions asked to him was, why did you want to come to Indiana? And he said, because they kept it honest and they were real. They were real about what they were building, the future they wanted to build. And that's huge for a coach, to be honest. I mean, that's why Bob Knight back in the day was able to get the kind of recruits that he got, because he was honest with them.
Absolutely.
I mean,
He got his kids that way.
exactly. And that's what Purdue does too.
Yes, and did with
100%.
Gene Katie as well.
Yeah, I mean, Purdue's still doing it, and it sounds like Indiana is starting to go back to those old ways. It may have been like that with Tom Crean. I don't think it was like that with Archie Miller and Mike Woodson. I just think it's like, especially with Mike Woodson this past year, it's like, you average 15 a game at Stanford. We need you, man. Come here. We need you. Here's $500,000 right here for you. So, I know of plenty of stories from Coach Knight back in the day of him being honest with recruits and them not coming to Indiana. I've talked to guys firsthand, and that alone, and Nick Dorn saying that, is a really good sign of where things are with this new coach. Another guy that committed last week was Sam Alexis from Florida. Played on
a national champion, yeah.
Yeah, but this was a guy that didn't play a whole lot at Florida. Saw the floor, and I don't want to say garbage time, but he was a backup big.
Yeah, he played every game. He played basically every game a few minutes.
Yeah. I mean, but this wasn't a guy that was playing. I mean, he was playing less than probably 20 minutes a game.
For sure.
He was a backup big, 6'9", which is no pun intended, big for Indiana. Averaged just about 5 points a game there at Florida, 3.5 rebounds. But before he was at Florida, he was at UT Chattanooga, where he averaged 11 points and 9 rebounds.
Right.
So that obviously jumped out to Florida to get him to come there. And then I think even looking at his stats from UT Chattanooga, that jumped out at Indiana. I don't think he's going to be your big guy. But I think it'll be, again, a solid backup, so we'll see. And then, of course, they get Jason Drake from Drexel, 11 points a game for him, 40% from 3. We talked about it last week. We've been talking about it. I probably even said this last week, that Indiana's going and getting these guys that can shoot the basketball very well from distance. And Jason Drake certainly is one of those guys. 40% from three for him. This is a guy that started his career playing junior college basketball, which nowadays has kind of turned out to be a kind of a gold mine a little bit for these college coaches, especially mid-major coaches. It started to become like, a farm system where some guys start off in junior college and they move to mid-major, then they move to the high
Right.
majors. And that's just kind of how it is this day and age. And Jason Drake is a product of one of those. And he started off at playing JUCO, then he went to Cleveland State, then he went to Drexel, which isn't much higher than Cleveland State, probably on the same level, but he's played mid-major. He averaged 11 points at Drexel. That obviously, again, was enough to jump out at Indiana to get him. And I'm sure that, Nick Dorn, going back to what we said a minute ago, where they were honest and kept it real, and him talking about what Indiana told him, I can't imagine a scenario where Coach DeVries and his staff weren't honest with other recruits they were recruiting. Like, I
Right.
can't imagine it was just Nick Dorn. You have Jason Drake, Sam Alexis, and Nick Dorn here in the past few days or so, and then Josiah Miles, who is the guy that I want to apologize because we forgot last week,
Oh no.
and he's been committed for about 2 weeks now. He comes from North Florida, 15 points a game for him, just about 7 rebounds, and shot 42% from three. That's also a big get.
A lot of small school guys. That can be tricky. Sometimes small school kids have a tough time adjusting, but as we saw this year in the NCAA tournament, a lot of times they're gonna continue to progress and be the best players on the teams, but sometimes it doesn't work. We know Reed Bailey, we know Tucker DeVries, we know Enright can play at this level. We are absolutely sure that Sam Alexis can play at this level. The other guys, we're kind of it's a wait and see. Can they? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with you. I think it's just too early to tell. That's a question that I think would be better answered a couple weeks into the season when
Right.
you finally kind of get a gauge on what's happening.
Or
Um,
even early in practice when you start to see
yeah,
who is standing out and who is playing with the first team, and which of these guys uh, is ready for the Big Ten level.
you're right. We'll see. But going back to a guy that we talked about a couple weeks ago and getting Tayton Connerway, he was the conference player of the year in the conference he came from.
Right, and
You
not a
know,
bad conference.
not a bad conference. The Atlantic Sun is not bad at all. One of the
Right,
top mid-major conferences in the country, and he was the player of the year in that league. That's saying something.
absolutely.
Um, like we said, it's too early to tell with these small school guys. But talking about Josiah Miles and him coming from Florida, Indiana hosted Josh Harris today on Monday. Um, when this is being recorded, they hosted him on Monday. He's also from North Florida. So I think that also plays a factor that, he would be reuniting with another one of his teammates in Josiah Miles. So we'll see. Indiana is able to get these guys. That roster is really coming together now. I like where it's at. Still waiting to hear back on a waiver pending from Luke Goody on if he could return for another season, which would be, I believe, his sixth season of college basketball. He played
He'd be his
basically
fifth.
fifth year. Okay. Yeah. He played most of his career at Illinois. He's an Indiana kid and then came over to Indiana. Indiana fans loved him. That was a guy they absolutely adored. And hopefully they could get him back for another year. That would also be a huge addition. Really would be excited to see him come back. But Indiana's roster's coming together, like where it's at. Coach DeVries is doing a great job. Um, I think right now Indiana has one of the best portal hauls in the entire country.
The only thing, though, Grant, is that a lot of teams in the Big Ten have had a really good transfer haul, and Purdue and Michigan both look like national championship contenders.
That's why the league is always so good,
Yeah,
because when these schools become the revolving door and it starts and guys are coming in and out every year, you're going to have every once in a while, you're going to have teams like Northwestern who are going to get a good haul, or like
right. Absolutely.
Minnesota is going to get a good haul. I'm not saying that Purdue and Michigan aren't just a 1 year deal on their portal haul, because they're always really good.
Right.
But
Yeah.
hopefully now with Indiana having a new coach, that
Yeah.
finally means that they're going to be able to get stuff like this every year now. Because let's be honest, statistics show that guys get in the portal. We just talked about 4 different guys. Statistics show that next season at this time, maybe at least 1 or 2 of those guys we've talked about tonight are going to be in a different or on a different team. That's just how it
Absolutely.
is.
It
This
is.
is a
It's
revolving door. I wouldn't be shocked if Sam Alexis came to Indiana for 1 year and then left, or Jason Drake or Nick Dorn or Lamar Wilkerson, who's probably their biggest commit they've got out of the portal, outside of probably Tucker DeVries. But that's obviously a given. Statistics show that the portal does this in college sports, not just basketball, but of course football. And this was a huge week for Indiana in both basketball and football, getting guys out of the portal, especially football, who I know we'll talk about soon, uh, who now is in their spring portal transition, and the portal opened back up for the spring to get guys and for guys to play spring games and spring practices and then go to a different team. So
Grant.
big time year for both programs.
We'll get to football here in a second. Still talk a little basketball. I think you'll find in the end that Sam Alexis is maybe the biggest one that they got outside of DeVries, as you mentioned. I think he's
You
going to
think
have.
so?
I think he's going to have a huge impact, and I think
Really?
he's yes. I think he was a really good player in waiting there behind an even better player.
I hope you're right, man. I mean, look, as a fan, as a guy who tries to stay in tune with the program, I really, really hope that it all works out. I hope those guys are so good that Indiana goes 40-0 next year. Is that going to happen? No. But I think Indiana, if things go correctly, I think the Big Ten is going to come down between the team in Bloomington and the team over in West Lafayette. And
Wow.
I know, I hope so. And
I
you know,
think in his first year, if they make the NCAA tournament, you should be happy.
100%. I think if the style of play is a little more watchable, I'll be
Yes,
happy.
absolutely, and it will be.
That's my biggest thing
Yes, yes.
is Indiana's going to miss the tournament at some point again in our lives. It may be next year, may not be for another few years. Purdue's going to end up missing the tournament at some point. Probably not in
Absolutely.
the
It's the
near
way things
future.
happen.
Probably not in the near future. But my thing is, what I want to see with Indiana is, can the style of play with the guys that they're getting, can it just be a little more fun and interesting to watch than the NBA stuff that we've seen in the last few years? I'm not saying the NBA is bad, but you're throwing a mediocre NBA coach with some amateurs that are not NBA level players playing an NBA style of game.
It was
You know,
not good. We don't need to rehash that, Grant. It was not good.
I know,
It's going
man.
to
You're
be
gonna get.
much better. And the big thing for me is, are they likable?
Oh, of course, because
The last
um,
couple of years, there were some effort issues at times. There were things like that, and not the most likable group. In the
no,
end, as a group,
I
not as
I
guys, not as individuals, but
I
as a group.
agree with you 100%.
And that's what I want to see. Can it be a team that every night we turn on and we can cheer for? You know, because not just because they wear IU, but because they're guys that we can cheer for. And it seems like that's one thing that he's definitely done.
I hope so. And that's the thing, like we talked about earlier with Indiana, and it's not just Indiana that did this; it's other places, and it goes on other places that we just may not be as in tuned with. But coaches, and I don't know who it would be. You'd really have to, I think, go and take a deep dive with it. But coaches will see guys that averaged 12 points a game at Virginia. I'm just using this as an example. I'm not saying anyone specifically, but let's say Tommy Jones averaged 15 a game at Virginia and was their third leading scorer. He gets in the transfer portal. Tommy, we want you, man. Here's $750,000 if you come play here. And we don't even care if you're going to fit our style. We're going to try and find a style that fits
Yeah,
you, but we don't really care. We just want you to come play because your numbers looked really good. And Indiana did that for a long time. And it just can't be like that anymore. You have to get the guys that suit your system. And if they
absolutely.
don't,
They're in and out so much, Grant, that they have to fit your system. You can't change your system for a player when they're not going to be
I
around
think,
for 4 years.
I think if you can get them in your system to where they can play good, I think that's when you start seeing guys that maybe will stay longer. Maybe not always, but maybe. And so hopefully that's what Indiana's doing now.
Let's shift to football. And for the first time in 8 years, IU had two players drafted in the same NFL draft, kind of a product of what we saw on the field in the fall. And I think they're probably going to be even more next year. But
There will be.
both players to the same team, the 49ers. First of all, does that change the way you feel about the 49ers in any way?
We'll definitely be paying probably a little more attention
I think
to them.
West may have an impact on that. We'll see.
I agree. I think if I think Rourke could be a serviceable backup. Now, he's not going to be the day one starter. Obviously, they have Brock Purdy, who is a top 10 quarterback in the league.
I think the 49ers should be looking to upgrade there.
You think so?
Absolutely.
Well, you see what Brock Purdy did. He was Mr. Irrelevant,
Yes.
and they turned him into a star. I mean, they
Because
turned him in.
they had the best roster in football around him. And now
Yeah,
that they don't, it's toward the end of last year it started to show why he
yeah.
was drafted last in the draft. And I was really surprised, and we're getting a little off topic here, but that they did not take Shador Sanders and just take a chance with him. But I regress. Um, so to me, if Rourke can go and be good, why can't he be Brock Purdy but better?
I hope it happens. I hope he can be the starter out there. He developed really well last year at Indiana.
Playing
And
with an injury.
what people are really forgetting is that guy basically played with one leg. I mean, he tore his ACL back in August. He played the entire season on a torn ACL, and no one ever knew. No one ever, they never told anyone. And I think the football gods or whatever almighty power had that knowledge and control to keep that inside them. Because Indiana doesn't do what they do last year without him. I mean,
Yeah, no question.
would you? Yeah,
He's a big part of it. And again, a big part of his development was coaching. And something else we don't have to rehash. It's nice to
exactly. And
it's nice to have a coach who develops players.
Exactly, and that's what I think he's going to get with his NFL franchise. He goes from playing under an offensive coordinator named Mike Shanahan, no relation, and not that Mike Shanahan, to now playing for Kyle Shanahan, who has no relation to Indiana's Mike Shanahan. So kind of a not a full circle moment, but just a little bit of a
Whose
coincidence.
father's name was Mike Shanahan, by the way?
You mentioned CJ West. I agree. I think he's going to have an impact right away. And
And the
he's a guy.
49ers, Grant, they know how to choose players deep in the draft on their defense. They've been doing that year
Mhm,
after year.
mhm. I can't think of really a really much better scenario for those two guys to get drafted to. And thankfully they went to the same team. How about that? I
Yeah.
mean,
Hopefully they like each other. I have no idea.
I would hope,
That
man.
would
I
be
think they
awkward
do.
if they had said goodbye. I'm glad I'm never going to be your teammate again. And then they got drafted by the same team. But otherwise, yeah, that's pretty cool.
I think actually, if I remember correctly, CJ West sent Curtis Rourke a text, or maybe Rourke texted him and said, "Can't wait to be teammates again."
Oh, good.
So
Good.
good
Good.
stuff there, man. So
Yeah.
I think I'd like that personally because then you feel like you're not alone. Like you're starting a new chapter in your career, and you have someone that you have gotten to know over the past year and a half, really.
Sure would make
That's
things a little more comfortable, wouldn't it?
probably, yeah, you would think. Um, but couldn't imagine a better scenario for those two guys to get drafted to out there in San Francisco. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do, and we'll definitely be paying attention to it.
And some other players are getting some shots too.
Yeah, and this is no surprise. I I kind of knew personally that Indiana would probably only get two guys drafted, maybe three guys, maybe. But these guys here, six undrafted free agents signed to NFL rosters. The biggest one being Jalen Walker. He was the third guy that I thought would get drafted. I don't know how he didn't get drafted. He was one of the anchors of that defense last year. Indiana's defense, looking at the guys they had on there are multiple NFL players from last year's roster and this year's incoming roster that are going to be playing in the NFL at some point. Jalen Walker was signed by the Las Vegas Raiders as a line. He played inside linebacker for Indiana. Trey Wettig is an offensive tackle who was signed by the LA Rams. Miles Price, a wide receiver who was teammates. No, that was Miles Cross. Sorry. Miles Price, however, was signed by the Minnesota Vikings as a wide receiver. Wide receiver Keyshawn Williams was signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tight end Zach Horton signed with the Detroit Lions. And defensive end James Carpenter signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Those are guys that I'm not surprised got signed. Like I said, I thought at least one of them, Jalen Walker, would maybe get drafted. But I think guys that are in the right system, like Zach Horton, I think can develop behind a really good tight end and get in a good tight end room there in Detroit and make an impact and get some snap reps. Um, he's a guy that actually caught the very first touchdown thrown in the Kurt Cignetti era against Florida International. Rourke threw it to Horton over the middle, caught it for a touchdown, and little did we know the kind of the spark that would light, and that was the first touchdown in the Kurt Cignetti uh, book there at Indiana.
The start of the magic.
Keyshawn Williams and Miles Price, I'm glad they landed on some solid teams. I'm really excited. James Carpenter, a guy from Indiana, signed with Jacksonville. Jack Kaiser, who's a guy from Pioneer. high school just outside Logansport from Notre Dame, was drafted
Right.
to the Jaguars. So
It's going to
a
be a
little
good one, I
Indiana
think.
connection there. Yeah, that's a really good pick for Jacksonville. So we'll see. It's just a matter of time before those guys start producing, and then next year we'll be talking maybe about 5 or 6 Indiana players that got drafted into the NFL.
Since the basketball roster has taken shape, and of course we'll continue to talk about IU basketball almost every week. There's always
Mhm.
something to talk about, Grant. Starting next week, we'll start to talk a little bit more about football. But just real fast,
Good.
since we've been doing this a while tonight, don't want to go too long. Tell me about what your feelings are about the roster and what your expectations are for the 25 Hoosier football team.
Because I think Indiana's roster for football is going to be better in 2025 than it was in 2024.
Seems so.
And it all starts with the defense. Just the guys they were able to retain with Aiden Fisher coming back, who I'm very excited about. D'Angelo Ponce coming back, Mikael Kamara coming back, and then getting a guy by the name of Kellen Wyatt, who played outside linebacker for Maryland, led that defense in tackles last year. You line him up on the opposite side of the defensive line with Mikael Kamara. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, man. I can't think of a more unstoppable front defensive line than what Indiana would have. I mean, that's just unbelievable. Uh, Kellen Wyatt was an all Big Ten selection, and he's coming to Indiana. That just that's just a dream, kind of a dream team on the defensive side. You talk about offense and Fernando Mendoza coming over from Cal, who I think has a little bit to prove. I'm not so sure how much better he is than Rourke. And then, you retain the guys, Elijah Surratt, who I think could be a first round draft pick. Omar Cooper Jr., I think, is going to, of course, have the impact this year. A freshman off the bench, a backup by the name of LeBron Bond is huge. He's really looked good in spring practice. Of course, you get Amari Farrell coming back, who's the safety on that defense. Devin Boykin, who's another transfer. Lewis Moore coming over from Ole Miss. I mean, this roster is really, really good. And they have Hosea Wheeler, who's a defensive tackle, who's coming over from Western Kentucky, who led that team in tackles, led that team in sacks down there with the Hilltoppers. And again, that's also a different level of football, but I think it's a little different than basketball, where your talent from football can translate from a mid-major level to a power 5 level, a power 4 level. I think it's a little different there, but that's a different
Yeah.
discussion for a different day. But just the way this roster is starting to take shape, man, it's going to be good. And look,
Okay,
they're
let me ask you a question then.
yeah,
Basketball season's over. The roster's kind of been put together. As of April 29th, 2025, Grant Shouse, have you ever been more excited about an upcoming Indiana football season?
never. But that's a kind of a bad thing I've been excited different years. I've been excited. This
Sure.
year's going to be a little different for me, I think. In 2021, I was excited. I was really excited. And I could not wait to sit in front of my TV, watch them take on Iowa, first game of the year after the COVID season when they had a solid COVID year. I only played like 8 games, won 6 games that year, made a bowl game. Was really excited for the next year after they had a good roster coming back in 2021. and then the first kickoff of the season is run back to the house for a touchdown for Iowa.
I don't think
And
that's
I'm
going to
like,
happen against Old Dominion on August
I don't.
30th.
Oh man, I hope not. Or I'm gonna be angry. But then again, those were different times. There was a different coach. There was a different mentality on the sideline. Now there's a different mentality on the sideline, maybe a
Different
better
feeling
mentality.
amongst the fans,
Yeah, yeah. So I was really excited going into last year because I remember the whole summer, I would say maybe the last month leading up to the first game, doing research, quite literally Googling this Kurt Signetti fella. And all the stuff he was saying, I kept thinking, man, if they do all the things that he says they can do or they're going to do, this team's going to be really freaking good. And I remember thinking that, but then I'm like, well, it's Indiana.
and that's what
They'll
all coaches
stumble.
say.
Yeah, they'll stumble.
Yeah,
They'll hit a rough patch. I think it got to the point where it was like, okay, what's the catch here?
yeah,
And there's a lot of situations in life where it's like, okay, what's the catch? Like this is seems too good to be true. And I'm sorry, Indiana lost 2 out of their last 3 football games last year. They lost in the college football playoff. They got embarrassed on national TV at Ohio State. But I'm telling you right now, I would 100% take that again. If you would have told me at the very beginning of the year, or even after Tom Allen was fired in 2023, hey, don't worry, better days are coming. This team's going to the playoffs next year. I would have been like, hell yeah,
exactly,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Absolutely. So I was excited last year. I'm definitely more excited going into this year. You know, me and my dad have season tickets. We're really looking forward to, of course, putting those to good use. 7 home games at the Rock this year. 7 home games. And the first 4 weeks are at home.
Got to
So
work
for
on that schedule, Grant.
yeah, for 4 Saturdays in a row,
I know
I'll
they've.
be there, man.
I know, but they got to work on that schedule. That is,
Oh,
it
oh,
is
they're going to.
pitiful.
Well, I actually that's one of the things I wanted to bring up
The
is
Big Ten schedule, by the way, the second half of the schedule is really tough, but
it
but
yeah,
the pre Big Ten is so bad that they deserve
it,
to be made fun of.
it is bad. And but that's the thing is that this was like that was scheduled at a time where of course the
Even that,
previous administration,
even for a bad program, that's a bad schedule.
not for Indiana though. That
Yes,
those were
even
games that no. I promise you, those are
you
games
have to play
that
one
the old teams are questionable on if they're
Grant.
even going to win.
You have to play one Kentucky or something like that to at least. You cannot
Well,
have two one double A schools and a new Division One school. That's inexcusable.
that's going to change though in 2026.
I know.
They were going to play Connecticut in 2026, and they canceled that. Um, and
It's not
so
much better.
that means they're probably going to find a new opponent in 2026. They're supposed to be playing Virginia. They're
Good.
supposed to be playing Colorado State.
Good.
I believe Colorado State's actually the first game of the year at Indiana, and that
That'll,
I mean Colorado State's a Mountain West team,
it's a
but
good program.
that's still a decent, that's
Yeah,
still
it's a good
a
program.
good team to open up the year with.
That's
And
a
then of course to play Virginia, that's also pretty good too.
Colorado State is twice as good as any of the teams that IU
Oh
plays
yeah.
on there. That's what I'm saying. You need at least one of those, even if you're not a very good program.
Exactly. And also another answer is because I already know that's going to be another one of the things people want to talk about. And I'm just going to say this. What the hell are they supposed to do about it right now?
They can't do anything about it.
And that's what I'm saying.
I'm just saying that was pretty bad. Purdue is horrible right now. At least they have Notre Dame on their schedule.
They do.
You gotta have at least one to
They
be
do.
legit.
I'll be interested to see how they do, man. That's going to be an interesting development
It
up there in
is.
West Lafayette,
It is. It
man.
seems like it's a positive direction for the first time since Brom. So, and not a lot of those in the life of Purdue, like the life of Indiana fans.
Yep.
Um, Few and far between. In fact, I know I've said this a lot um, over the time, but what Signetti did reminds me of the first year of Joe Tiller at Purdue. And I remember how excited I was in 1998 with the first year of the starting quarterback of Drew Brees, some guy we'd only seen a couple of times as a freshman. And but I remember how excited everybody was as Purdue fans because we had never seen it. Even when Rod Woodson was with Purdue, the best they did was 7 wins.
The era of football, I think, is of course different now than it probably
Yes,
was then.
way different.
And of course, I mean, obviously the Big Ten's different. Like
Way different.
Indiana's Big Ten schedule, even I think the entire Big Ten schedule is actually pretty tough. I
I
mean,
use Big Ten schedule is tough.
it's very tough. And these people last year who wanted to talk about Indiana didn't play anyone. Indiana and even the Big Ten probably wasn't expecting Indiana to be good. I mean,
Yeah.
they just scheduled it how they did. I mean, there was nothing they could have done about it. I mean, and it wasn't very good. Those teams were not very good. But people kept saying Indiana wasn't very good. Well, if Indiana wasn't very good, then why were they beating these teams?
Yeah.
Because I thought Indiana wasn't very good. So why are they beating other teams that are bad?
To be fair, Grant, it seemed like a fluke for a long time, and then they proved us wrong.
Let me ask you a question. When do you think they started to prove us wrong?
Washington, I think, without
Okay.
Rourke, and I think that was the
Okay.
one where we went, oh,
The one
okay,
that
this is
got
different.
me, the one that got me last year was Nebraska. That was probably the one
Yeah.
that got me.
And the
But
Michigan State game, to me, Grant, when they were down 10-0, and I
Mhm.
said to Susie, IU's going to win this game 35-10 because you could
Yeah,
just see that they were the better team, even down 10-0.
yeah.
That's when I said, "Oh, this thing's legit.
Well,
This is a legit team that could win a playoff game."
Well, I remember thinking last year when they beat UCLA and nobody was really like, man, they only beat UCLA. And I'm thinking, this is a big deal
It was a
because
pretty big deal. Yes,
Indiana just doesn't go out there and do that. Like
exactly.
I can't think of any Indiana team in my lifetime that's hopping on a 4 hour plane ride to go out there to Southern
None.
California and beat UCLA. I know UCLA wasn't that good, but you
Yep.
have to consider the fact of how bad Indiana has been
Not since Bill Mallory
forever.
would that have
Yeah,
happened.
forever.
Yeah.
And then they beat Maryland, and then it was like, okay, this is starting to change. And then Nebraska happened, Washington happened,
Yeah,
and
Nebraska, you're
then
probably right.
it all happened.
I think it happened in a stage where it went, all right, Nebraska, that's a big win, and then Washington with your backup quarterback, and it's just a
Yeah.
dominating performance, and there was no doubt about it from the start. And Washington was in the national championship last year, not the same team, but still.
hmm
That's to me when I went, oh, okay,
My
this
my
is
thing is, and this is the last thing I'll leave you with, Greg. I was there for Nebraska and Washington. That Washington game, even when I still think about it, sometimes it gets me. But that Washington game was by far, as of right now, being 20 years old, probably the most insane place I've ever been for a sporting event. That place was packed. It was loud. It was rocking. It was game day. Saban was in town. Herb Street, the guys were in town, and it's a tradition. Lee Corso was back, and I remember being there with my girlfriend, and I remember about 10 minutes before kickoff, and that stadium was full, and it's a sea of red, and I'm looking around, and it's kickoff's getting ready to happen, and I'm looking around, and that place is loud, and I remember just getting emotional because I've been to games there when there's been 5,000 people there. It's been a November Saturday and there's nobody there. And that place, it doesn't get loud. Like it echoes in there. It's so empty. I've sat in pouring down rain games there in that stadium where there was nobody in the stadium. So to see that got me emotional. And then the one play I'll never forget was D'Angelo Pons comes off of an edge, and Washington screwed up the play because they were trying to run a backwards pass, like a lateral play. And the quarterback goes to throw it, and here comes Pons out of nowhere. It's like a streak of lightning. And he basically steals this ball like he's a basketball defender. And he takes this thing and he takes it all the way to the house. And man, I've never heard a sporting event get that loud. I mean, that place was just unbelievable. And then, you're watching it, so you're watching it live, so you don't know what's being said on the national broadcast. And then finally you go back and hear that crowd or hear that call from the guy calling the game. And it's a call that will always stick with me. And if you're an IU fan, you know what I'm talking about. It's the D'Angelo Pons roll out the big red carpet. And that was the defining moment for me when I was like, this is officially different. This is officially what I've always wanted it to see, was that moment, that Washington game. Just unbelievable. And hopefully we get some of those. We get plays like kind of similar to that. We get atmospheres and crowds like that until it goes back to the way it was and Indiana's bad again. But for now, love enjoying it. Can't wait for next season.
I'm sure that's the case all over Indiana. Fans can't wait for this coming football season. Thanks so much to Grant once again. Love doing the IU report every week. And thank you for listening. You could really help us out by sharing these segments with your friends and family. And we appreciate it so much when you do. The Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media, and I love Susie.